In the winter of 1955, somewhere in the chaparral-covered hills east of San Diego, California, men in unmarked work clothes poured concrete deep into the earth. The trucks arrived before dawn. The gates were always locked. The neighbors who noticed the construction were told it was a weather station, a reservoir, a telephone relay hub, anything but what it actually was. Because what was being buried in those hills, hidden beneath false rooftops and false identities, were nuclear-tipped missiles pointed at the sky, ready, at a moment's notice, to detonate over American soil to stop something even more terrifying from reaching the ground below. What was being built in secret across the ridge lines and canyon mouths surrounding one of the most powerful naval installations on Earth was a ring of atomic fire. And for nearly 3 decades, the people of San Diego lived directly beneath it without knowing a thing. In 2026, the last classified operational maintenance files from the San Diego Nike Ajax and Nike Hercules program were quietly released through the National Security Archive. For the first time, historians could read what the soldiers stationed at these sites already knew, that several of the missiles in Southern California were fitted with W-31 nuclear warheads, each carrying a yield equivalent to between 2 and 40 kilotons. Hiroshima was 15. These weapons were not aimed outward. They were aimed upward, and the cities they were designed to protect were also the cities they could have irradiated if anything had gone wrong. What you're about to hear is the story of 12 installations that have been hiding in your backyard for 70 years. Some are parks now, some are ruins, and at least one has never been fully explained. To understand why the Army buried nuclear missiles around San Diego, you have to understand what the United States military believed was coming in the early years of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb in 1949. By 1953, it had tested a hydrogen device. American intelligence, deeply shaken, deeply uncertain, began modeling scenarios in which Soviet Tu-4 bombers, and later Tu-95 Bears, crossed the Arctic, came down the Pacific coast, and dropped nuclear payloads on the ports, shipyards, and fleet anchorages that made American naval power possible. San Diego was not a peripheral target. It was perhaps the single most important naval target on the western seaboard. Naval Air Station North Island, the 32nd Street Naval Station, the submarine base at Point Loma, the shipyards at National City. Destroying these installations in a first strike would cripple American Pacific power projection for years. The Soviets knew this. The Americans knew the Soviets knew it. The answer, conceived by Bell Laboratories and developed at White Sands, was Project Nike, named for the Greek goddess of victory. The Nike system was the world's first operational surface-to-air guided missile defense network, and it was not modest in its ambitions. Across the continental United States, the Army quietly constructed over 250 Nike installations in a coordinated program that cost the equivalent of tens of billions in today's dollars. The sites were built in rings around major cities, industrial centers, and strategic military installations. Los Angeles got its ring. Chicago got its ring. New York, Washington, Seattle, all of them girdled by hidden missile batteries. And San Diego, guarding the Pacific Fleet, got 12. Each installation followed a roughly identical design, though the geography of Southern California forced constant adaptation. The sites were split into 2 components, a launch area and a control area, typically separated by a mile or more of rough terrain to complicate enemy targeting. The control area housed the radar systems, the acquisition radar that searched the sky for incoming aircraft, and the tracking radar that locked onto specific targets, along with the computer systems that calculated intercept solutions and the underground operations bunker where the crew would receive launch authorization. The launch area held the real secret. Beneath a deceptively ordinary-looking surface, a flat pad, a sliding door, a concrete apron that looked more like a rural loading dock than a weapons platform, were the magazine elevators. These were hydraulic platforms that could raise a fully assembled missile, fueled and armed from its underground storage bay to the surface in under a minute. In the event of an attack, soldiers would have had between 2 and 4 minutes to bring a missile to the surface. verify its guidance alignment, and fire. The Army's chosen cover for all of this was almost admirably brazen. They called the installations air defense artillery sites, which was technically accurate and practically meaningless to anyone not already read into the program. Signs posted at the perimeter fences said nothing about missiles. Local newspapers ran occasional vague notices about Air Force radar equipment in nearby hills. Real estate developers selling homes in communities directly adjacent to Nike sites, places like Bonita, El Cajon, and Ramona, made no mention of what was buried a quarter mile from the new subdivision. The silence was not accidental. It was mandated. The construction of the San Diego Nike ring began in 1953 and was substantially complete by 1956, though upgrades and modifications continued well into the 1960s. The contractors who built the sites worked under strict compartmentalization. The crew laying concrete foundations was not the same crew installing the magazine elevator mechanisms. The crew installing the electronics was kept entirely separate from the crew handling the launcher assembly. Each team knew its own piece. Nobody had the full picture. This was not inefficiency, it was doctrine. The Army had learned from its experience with the Manhattan Project that human beings talk, neighbors gossip, workers have wives, and wives have friends. The only reliable secret is one that nobody fully understands. The sites were constructed using a technique that would become standard in Cold War infrastructure, building in plain sight by making the visible portion utterly unremarkable. From the road, most Nike launch areas looked like small industrial compounds, a chain-link fence, a few low cinder block buildings, perhaps a water tower. The underground portions were another matter entirely. Workers excavated to depths of 30 feet or more, pouring reinforced concrete walls nearly 3 feet thick, installing blast doors, ventilation shafts, and waterproofing systems designed to keep the magazine habitable even if the surface installation was destroyed in a conventional strike. The magazines themselves were long, narrow chambers, temperature-controlled and humidity-regulated, holding the disassembled missiles in horizontal racks like enormous mechanical cigars. The Ajax missiles, the first generation deployed in San Diego, were 32 feet long and needed the underground space of a small warehouse. The Hercules missiles that replaced them in the early 1960s were even larger and required new elevator systems with higher load ratings. The construction crews who came back to retrofit the existing sites for Hercules were told only that the changes were related to improved air defense equipment. Nobody said nuclear. But there was a problem. As the sites became operational and began to be staffed by rotating crews of Army soldiers, the human dimension introduced complications that no amount of concrete or secrecy could fully contain. The men stationed at Nike sites around San Diego were young, most of them between 18 and 23, and they were living in extraordinary proximity to extraordinary weapons while being paid ordinary wages and given ordinary Army rations. The control areas typically had barracks for a crew of around 80 soldiers, with a mess hall, a recreation room, a small library, and a motor pool. By the standards of forward-deployed Army life, it was almost comfortable. But the psychological weight of the assignment was not ordinary at all. The crews operated on a rotating alert schedule. At any given moment, a portion of the site's missiles were maintained in a state of readiness that the Army called AADCP, Army Air Defense Command Post Alert, meaning they were fueled, guidance aligned, and capable of being raised to the surface and fired within the 2 to 4 minute window. For the soldiers who maintained this state of readiness, the abstract threat of Soviet bombers was not abstract at all. It was the reason they checked their instruments every 4 hours, the reason they ran drills in the middle of the night, the reason the launch area was always manned even on Christmas Day. What they discovered next was even more disturbing. In the early 1960s, as the Nike Hercules system was upgraded to carry nuclear warheads in addition to conventional ones, the soldiers at the relevant sites were told, in careful bureaucratic language, that their missiles now had a different kind of payload, the W-31 Warhead. The briefings emphasized the safety systems. They emphasized the PAL codes, the permissive action links that were supposed to prevent unauthorized detonation. What the briefings did not fully address was what a nuclear detonation at low altitude over the approaches to a major American city would actually look like from the ground. The soldiers who asked were told it was not their concern. Their concern was the intercept. What happened after was someone else's problem. Records tell a different story about the official safety culture at these sites. Declassified incident reports from Nike installations across the United States, not specifically San Diego, but part of the same program, document at least 3 accidents involving Nike missiles that resulted in detonations of conventional warheads, multiple injuries, and at least 1 fatality at a New Jersey installation in 1958. The Army's own internal reviews noted that the combination of high-pressure liquid fuels, electrical systems prone to shorts in damp conditions, and young, sometimes undertrained crews created a persistent low-level danger that was managed rather than eliminated. At the San Diego sites, the climate added its own complications. The coastal fog that rolls into the canyons east of the city created persistent moisture problems in the underground magazines. Maintenance logs from several installations noted recurring issues with corrosion in the hydraulic elevator systems. The missiles themselves required constant attention. An unfired Nike Hercules that sat in its magazine for 6 months was not the same weapon as one freshly assembled. The propellant degraded. The guidance components drifted. Keeping 12 separate sites in a state of genuine combat readiness around the clock for 2 decades was an undertaking of staggering complexity. And it was done almost entirely invisibly, in holes in the ground, by people who could not tell anyone what they were doing. The cover-up was not a single act of deception. It was a continuous maintenance operation, requiring constant attention and constant reinforcement. When local newspapers periodically asked the Army about the fence compounds in the hills, the standard response was a brief statement confirming the existence of air defense artillery facilities and declining to provide further details on grounds of operational security. When communities near the sites began to grow, when subdivisions crept up to the fence lines and parents began asking what was inside the compound their children could see from the school bus, the Army's public affairs operation produced carefully worded materials describing the sites as early warning radar stations. Real estate agents selling homes adjacent to Nike sites were not legally required to disclose the presence of nuclear weapons nearby because the nuclear weapons were classified. The buyers did not know. In many cases, neither did the sellers. The knowledge lived entirely inside the fence. By 1974, the Nike program in San Diego was over. The threat had changed. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, traveling at thousands of miles per hour through the upper atmosphere, could not be intercepted by a Nike Hercules. The Soviet doctrine had shifted. The era of the manned strategic bomber as the primary nuclear delivery system had passed, and with it, the rationale for the entire Nike network. The Army began decommissioning the San Diego sites on a rolling schedule between 1970 and 1974. What happened next to each installation is a story of bureaucratic dispersal, partial demolition, and in several cases, a deliberate ambiguity about what had ever been there at all. Several of the sites were transferred to the county or to local municipalities and converted into parks or open space. The surface structures were demolished. The underground magazines were sealed. In most cases, the elevator shafts were capped with concrete. The blast doors were welded shut, and the magazine chambers were left intact beneath the surface, filled in some cases with groundwater. At Sycamore Canyon, one of the best preserved former Nike sites in the region, hikers today walk across what appears to be an ordinary concrete pad, not knowing that beneath their feet the magazine chambers still exist, flooded to a depth of several feet, with the original wall fixtures and cable conduits still in place. The missiles are gone. The warheads were removed and transferred to Army depots before decommissioning. But the architecture of the Cold War's buried threat remains, submerged and silent, under the parks where children now play. Other sites have stranger histories. At least 2 of the former San Diego Nike installations were transferred to private ownership during the 1980s through surplus property auctions. In both cases, the federal documentation accompanying the transfers described the sites as former communications facilities. The underground structures were disclosed but described in terms that obscured their original function. One site, in the hills above the eastern county, was purchased by a small industrial firm and used for storage before being abandoned in the late 1990s. Local hikers who discovered the site in the 2000s described finding intact blast doors, rusted but sealed, and ventilation shafts that produced a distinct low-frequency hum on windy days, a sound caused, engineers later confirmed, by air moving through the original ventilation system, which remained partially open to the surface despite decades of supposed decommissioning. Modern urban explorers who have documented several of the accessible former sites describe a consistent atmosphere. The concrete is intact, mostly, though stained with decades of moisture and in places cracked by root intrusion. The electrical conduit is empty. The wiring was stripped out during decommissioning, presumably for salvage. The magazine elevator shafts are capped, as described in Army records, but at one site the cap appears to be a more recent addition than the surrounding concrete, leading some researchers to wonder whether the original shaft was left open longer than official records indicate. Nobody has drilled into the caps to find out what is below. Nobody has been given permission to. The legacy of the 12 Nike sites around San Diego is not simply a story of Cold War paranoia and hidden weapons. It is a story about what governments do when they are genuinely frightened, when the threat is real enough and the stakes are high enough that ordinary transparency becomes, in the official calculus, a luxury that cannot be afforded. The men and women who built these sites, staffed them, maintained them, and eventually sealed them were not villains. Most of them were doing exactly what they believed their country needed them to do. In a moment when the possibility of nuclear war over American cities was not a theoretical abstraction, but a scenario that military planners ran through in meticulous detail every single week. The soldiers who sat in underground bunkers in the hills above San Diego, watching radar screens for the signature of Soviet bombers, were doing something real and something difficult, and they did it invisibly, without credit or acknowledgement, for 20 years. But the silence that surrounded them was not neutral. The communities built in the shadows of these sites, the families who moved into subdivisions next to the fence lines without knowing what was inside, the children who grew up within the blast radius of nuclear warheads pointed at the sky above their schools. They were participants in a calculus they were never asked to consent to. That is the inheritance of the Nike program, not the missiles themselves, which are gone, not the warheads, which are gone, but the knowledge still settling into public consciousness 50 years later that the Cold War was not fought only in distant places. It was fought in the hills above your city, in the concrete beneath your park, in the humming silence of sealed blast doors that nobody has opened in decades. We know about these 12 sites because the Army eventually told us, in pieces, over many years. The 2026 document release filled in the final gaps: the warhead deployment schedules, the incident reports, the internal memos debating whether local communities should ever be informed. They were not. The question that the newly released files do not answer, and that historians are only beginning to ask, is whether San Diego's 12 sites were truly the complete picture. The Nike program was one program. It was not the only program. The hills around this city held many secrets. The ones we know about are the ones they chose to show us. What about the others? What about the ones still waiting, sealed and silent, for someone to ask the right question? If you are drawn to stories of hidden Cold War history and buried nuclear secrets, subscribe now, because the next chapter is darker than this one, and it has never been told before.